Welcome back, everyone, to the Windbridge Afterlife Science Podcast. I'm Anna, and as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Aaliyah.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad to have you back with us for another episode where we dive into the fascinating science of dying, death, and what comes next.
Before we get started, a quick disclaimer. The information we share today is for educational purposes and personal growth. It's not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment, so if you're dealing with emotional or psychological distress, please consult a qualified healthcare provider.
All right, let's jump into today's topic, support for the survival of consciousness after death. This is a huge area of interest, and the Windbridge Research Center has done some incredible work in researching this. We're going to break it all down for you, so you'll have a clear understanding by the end of today's episode.
So there are two major theories when it comes to what happens after we die. The first one is materialism, which is the belief that consciousness is created by the brain. In this theory, when the brain dies, so does consciousness. Pretty straightforward, right?
Right, and that's the view most people are familiar with, but there's another explanation called non-local consciousness. This theory suggests that consciousness exists beyond the brain and continues even after our physical bodies die. In other words, consciousness isn't just something our brain creates, it's something that exists independently.
Exactly. Think of it like a radio signal. The brain is the radio, but the signal, your consciousness, is out there, whether or not the radio is on.
And this idea that consciousness is non-local explains all sorts of fascinating phenomena, like out-of-body experiences, telepathy, even clairvoyance.
Yeah, these are all examples of how consciousness operates outside the limits of the brain. Researchers have studied these for decades. People have been able to access information from great distances or even across time, which is something that really can't be explained by materialism alone.
Now, let's talk about what really supports the survival hypothesis. There's actually a lot of scientific research out there that backs up the idea that consciousness continues after death. We're talking about things like children remembering past lives, near-death experiences, end-of-life experiences, and after-death communication.
The evidence for children who remember past lives is particularly fascinating. There are documented cases where children recall specific details of people and places they couldn't possibly know. Dr. Jim Tucker has done extensive work in this area, and it's mind-blowing to see how accurate these memories can be.
And don't forget about near-death experiences, or NDEs. These are events where people who have been clinically dead report things like seeing bright lights, meeting deceased loved ones, or even viewing their physical bodies from above. The evidence collected from NDEs really supports the idea that consciousness continues after death.
Right, and researchers like Dr. Pim Van Lommel and Dr. Bruce Grayson have spent years studying these experiences. What's interesting is that these experiences are often reported by people across different cultures and backgrounds, suggesting that something more universal is going on here.
Then there are end-of-life experiences, visions or dreams people have as they're nearing death. Many people report seeing deceased loved ones or experiencing comforting visions. These events are well documented and provide a lot of comfort to those approaching the end of life.
And finally, we have after-death communication, which is something the Windbridge Research Center has focused a lot on. Mediums who claim to communicate with the deceased have provided evidence in controlled settings that they can obtain information about the dead without prior knowledge. The center's research director, Dr. Julie Bai Shell's work in this area is groundbreaking. The data she and her team has collected build the case that consciousness continues on after physical death.
So, when you look at all of this together, the psi research, the evidence from mediums, the personal experiences, it really starts to stack up in favor of the survival of consciousness. This is not just one-off stories or anecdotes. It's data that's been collected over decades, across cultures, and through rigorous scientific methods.
Absolutely. The survival hypothesis offers a compelling alternative to materialism, especially when you take into account all of the unexplained phenomena. It's an area of study that deserves more attention, especially for those of us interested in what happens after we die.
And let's be honest, it's a question that pretty much everyone thinks about at some point in their life. What happens when we die? If you've ever had that thought, you're not alone, and it's exciting to know that science is working to explore this mystery.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but we hope this conversation helped shed some light on the survival of consciousness. If you want to dive deeper into the science behind this, the Windbridge Research Center has plenty of free resources available.
Just head over to windbridge.org to explore our educational materials. You can also join our mailing list to stay updated on the latest research. And if you believe in the importance of this work, consider donating to support more of it.
Thanks again for joining us today on the Windbridge Afterlife Science Podcast. We'll be back soon with more fascinating discussions. Until then, take care and keep asking those big questions.
Bye, everyone.